Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew and I'm marketing operations here with Smarty. Today's webinar is about the good, the bad, and the ugly of addresses, and we're super excited to get started. However, before I introduce our awesome panelists, our discussioneers, let me go over a couple housekeeping items. One, this webinar will be recorded. It's being recorded right now. We'll send a copy of this recording out to everybody who registered, so if you need to step out early, you can view the recording later. You'll be checking for that in your email inbox. If you enjoy this or you know someone else that may enjoy this or benefit from this information, you'll be able to forward that email on to them. And you are making this very available for you. Second, to interact with in the discussion to get the most out of this, please use the Zoom chat and Q&A panels, parts of the interface. To make sure that you get what you want out of this, we do need you to pipe up and tell us what you think, what you're hoping for. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we're hoping to get a lot of audience participation from this. All right. So our speakers, our presenters today, we have Savannah Ryan, Adam Charlton, and Bryan Amundson, three of our expert developers who work with addresses on the daily, and they have a lot of experience here. We also have David Padeken from our customer success team. He's seen a lot of address data. He's seen how a lot of people are using this address data, and we're going to have a lot of fun perspectives here. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over. I think Bryan is running the show at the start, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Actually, it's Adam, so.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take it from here. So thank you for the introduction, Andrew. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about the addresses. We're going to be talking about some of the weirder ones, some of the more interesting addresses in the US. We're just bringing it to you. We've been providing on these webinars a lot of fantastic information about addresses, and now we get to look at some of the more weirder sides. So let's go ahead and get started. Just because I feel like that we're almost obligated to in these webinars, we're going to provide a little bit of factual information about addresses. There is a ton of addresses in the US. We have over 220 million addresses, a lot of those being apartment buildings, and over 900,000 unique street names. And so when you have that many different addresses that you have to uniquely identify in the US, you can get some oddities, and people like to come up with their own street or address names, and that can lead to some odd situations. So let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those might be. So just take a look at some of these addresses here, especially that first one. I mean,
yeah, this top one I discovered at one point. We were trying to do some matching on it, and we're like, what? That's a street name? 29 and a half, 29 and 7/8. Yeah. Just imagine telling somebody over the phone on that, right?
Is the number at the beginning also part of the address? So it's 2818, 29 and a half, 29 and 7/8 Avenue.
Yeah. The actual street street name is 29 and a half, 29 and 7/8.
There's probably a wizarding school in Wisconsin, apparently. That's totally like a Harry Potter address if I ever saw one.
Sure. But instead of like a train station, you just walk into a tree and you're there. Right?
Yeah. You drive your car directly into a building, and that's how you get to that street.
Yeah, I don't know. The first time I saw this address, I think it's probably the closest I've ever come to feeling like I've been dyslexic. Like I feel like I almost can't concentrate on the numbers in this address without feeling a little dizzy, you know? Heaven forbid that you actually live on this street and have to tell people where you live, you know?
I bet the math nerds that are in that town use decibels instead of fractions. 29.5, and anyway. Funny.
Yeah, and you get some of the other ones too, like the second and third ones we have, the street name is Street, and you also have Street Road, which just feels wrong on an emotional level, you know?
Now that last one, you got to be careful how you say it, because it could be a very painful experience.
3A.
Yes, 3A whole Spur Alamo. So you really have to get your intonation right, otherwise you can offend some people.
Yeah, it's probably like three really bad brothers that lived on one road that were just really rude. And the neighbor, the city organizer decided to name it the 3 A-hole street.
I think that's going to be the moral of the story for this entire webinar, right? It's like, don't take off the postmaster, because then you'll have to live on Street your entire life, right?
Yeah, look at that.
I'm going to make your address impossible to find, So let's keep going to the next one. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to look at what we call satellite candy. These are some neighborhoods that just look absolutely bonkers from the air. So if you take a look at this one, this is in Florida because, of course, it's in Florida. But it starts with A down here, and all of the different streets follow the letters of the alphabet all the way around, all the way from A down here. You can't really see them, but it goes from like C to D, E, F, all the way around to Z or X, I think. Yeah, X, Y, and Z for Zenora. It's pretty impressive looking, honestly, if you ask me.
Yeah. And I tried to get some street view from inside of this, but they don't allow it. It must be a private neighborhood, but it does look like a very interesting place to live. Lots of bridges, I'm guessing.
It looks like to get in there.
Yeah, it looks like one of those ink blot things that therapists use to ask you about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
So how does this neighborhood make you feel? What is that? Does it bring up feelings about your experience with your mother or something? So yeah, that community planner, being that it's all alphabetically lined, that's how my wife is. They probably have OCD a little bit, and they're a therapist too, so they're working through it. That's good.
Okay, the satellite Rorschach test. Well, if you like that one, you're really going to like this next one. So this one is also in Florida. But it's just this perfect spherical looking neighborhood, right? And so you get all of these major roads that loop through these subdivisions with like these little minor bridges or walking paths that connect all the different neighborhoods. It's an interesting looking neighborhood, at least from the satellite view.
And it looks like there's a little rocket down there on the left-hand side as well. It is a fascinating architecture.
Like a tree next to that. There's a game called City Skylines. It's a computer game, and it makes me want to go and try to rebuild all of these developments in there. There's a comment from the audience also. Did you know that Did you know that not only two towns can have the same zip code in different countries? And also in New Jersey, there's a road called Rue Road, which means road, since Rue is road in French.
So we got street, we got road, and then we got street road. So right. All we need is the road street in order to complete the trifecta, right? So let's move on to the next one. So one of the interesting things that we deal with at Smarty is really trying to make sure that you got the right address. So there's some weird bits about this though, so you got zeros. So zeros, you can just throw them anywhere. It doesn't really change the number, except when they're very important. These zeros, they deserve to be there. If you try and validate on these addresses, it'll return with these zeros in place. It is critical to the address, which just feels wrong.
It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
Leading zeros are fine on football jerseys and maybe pin numbers, but I'm sorry, not on road numbers. That just is too confusing.
But in the USPS and their infinite wisdom has determined that these roads deserve zeros. So at least it's never as bad as Wisconsin. Wisconsin, you can have any number of zeros and it'll be totally fine, even on the same address. So
is that for people? Is that for people to just, they can type in as many zeros as they want to just get a new address? Is it like when you're trying to get a new email and it's already taken, you just add a bunch of like numbers before it?
Right. I think it's to prevent people from getting so bored of typing through the address that they just fall asleep on the zero key and they decided to still accept it.
Yeah. Or like when your cat walks across your laptop while you're typing in an address.
Yeah, it's a cat-proof address, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think people who make up these roads, they ought to really go through a course first about things not to do. And Illinois just seems to be, they love that. And I really like the third one down there. It's like 00. Ooh. Yeah.
All right, so moving on to the next one. So with this next address, it's deceptively simple compared to some of the other addresses. And then you really have to look carefully to notice that there's some spaces in between these letters here. This isn't 102 West. This is 102 West E Street. And this about gave me a heart attack the first time that I was trying to figure out what this address is doing, right? Because it just looks like 102 West. And, heaven forbid that you don't add the correct spaces when you're writing your address, because it'll just go somewhere in the country. But it's I don't know. I would not like to live on this address.
Like the wicked address of the West. Like a wicked witch address of the West. It's the wicked witch's, the West wicked witch's address.
We find these addresses because we have to make sense of user input. That's one of the big challenges that we have. And when we came across this one, it's like, this is full of all sorts of possibilities of getting it wrong. Not a good.
There's an Avenue Road that runs for miles in Toronto. So this person says it drove me crazy when I first saw it.
Yeah, and you run into things like that. And that's one of the hard things about doing the address validation that we do here at Smarty, is that people name their streets and their roads all sorts of nonsensical things that seems to break all the rules, right? You have Avenue Roads, or you have, like this West E Street that looks exactly like West. And but you still, people live on these. You can't just ignore these addresses as much as I would like to. I can't tell you how much I want to see weird addresses like this and go, yeah, no, we're not solving that problem. You can't do that. People live on this. They still got to get their mail. And so you have to figure out, how do we match these addresses to where they're supposed to go?
I feel for people who live on this, live at this address, because I have a Hawaiian name, and every time teachers would call roll, it was not a fun time. So I imagine trying to confirm my address with someone over the phone. If I lived at this address, it'd just be a whole mess that would end in tears, I'm sure. But luckily, not all addresses are quite difficult to match. Sometimes they're just a little wacky. So let's take a look at some of these. So here we have some wonderfully themed opposite addresses of each other. You got the one Jesus loves you way. And then on the flip side of it, in San Diego, right outside of, I think what is it? Is it Black Mountain, Brian?
Yeah, Black Mountain.
So outside of Black Mountain, we have this incredible neighborhood that has some pretty good theming there.
Now, the interesting thing about this too is that when you name a street and they're all around in a neighborhood, Del Diablo Lane, street, way, it's got to be confusing, especially for people who just leave street suffixes off, right? They may not be significant, so they just leave them off. I'm guessing that some people in this neighborhood get each other's mail. Oh, yeah. Let's go ahead and deliver Bob's mail over to him, because I'm always getting his. He's laying it on the street.
And so there's just some fun theming here, right? It's you got the Jesus Maria Road and the Jesus Loves You Way, and then you just got the Satan neighborhood over in San Diego. So
I think we've got a picture of that, I think, right?
Let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, so here's a picture of it. So this right over here is Black Mountain. And then you got all of the Del Diablo streets, and there's Satanas, and I think just outside there's a couple more that's like Lucifer Lane, things like that.
I just want to know, for the people that moved there, was that a calling card? Yes, I'm gonna live on Satana Street. That is where I want to live. Just so interesting.
Yeah.
There's a comment here that says, we looked at a house in New Jersey on Shades of Death Road.
Oh, gee.
Oh, yeah.
They decided no on the house, no matter how nice, was worth that address.
You see, and that is incredible. And we have some addresses that are going to be very similar to that. And you've answered a lifelong question that I've had while working here. It's like, who actually wants to live at these addresses, right?
and this address or this neighborhood is actually a really nice neighborhood as well.
Well, yeah, because you can't make the property value go down anymore.
Yeah. I think probably the first guy that moved there didn't want to have any neighbors, and so he named all the streets things that you think people wouldn't move to.
Oh, sure. Well, that didn't quite work, as you can see, right?
Yeah, it looks like a pretty nice neighborhood.
It's become so regional that you have like a ceiling specialist now in the neighborhood, and you know it's gone when that happens. So
Yeah, all they need is a church. Is there any churches in that neighborhood?
I didn't see any. No.
All right. Well, the names are it's a namesake thing. It's doing its job then.
So moving on to the next one. Now we have the longest and the shortest addresses that we could find in our data sets. So this one right here is actually has a very fond place in my heart. That's the address that I always use for testing new things, 1A, whole MA. And it's just the shortest validatable address that we can find in our data set. It uniquely identifies a single place, and it's very easy to type in. But on the flip side of it, we have these things, and I don't know. I would get tired by the time I got to the end of telling someone my address. You know, I would need a nap.
What's worse, though, trying to spell out a really long address or trying to explain that you live at 13 W.E. Street? And yes,
I feel like
that's
W.E.
the
Street is way worse.
Wow. Depends if you have to explain it.
You see, I don't even know about that. I don't know about that. You know, because like sometimes you need to spell out your name or things when you're signing up for things, right? Just try and imagine, you know, verifying that they got this whole thing right. Like 1401 Native Sons of the Golden West Park Road, Redwood City, California. It's just that you'd have to repeat it like 7 times before they were able to enter it in, right?
Someone brings up a good point. These probably have local slang names if you live there long enough.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Along these lines, Adam has mentioned that he likes using 1A Street, Hull, Massachusetts, 02045 because it's really fast and easy to type. Somebody else brings up, do you have a favorite spam address like 1313 Mockingbird Lane, Springfield, Massachusetts, 02143 or something that any addresses that you may
You know, here at Smarty, we actually have a number of various addresses that we like, and we all kind of come up with our own custom words to describe like fake addresses. I know Bryan in particular loves taco, and so it's always like 123 Taco Street, right? Another developer has blah, so it's like 7 blah Street. So we do come up with all of these addresses. I think one of the most common in our examples for a while, and it became so common that someone complained and we started having to mix it up a little bit, was like 123 Main Street. Just the most basic example you can imagine. And that's an example that we use a lot in our examples or in presentations and whatnot. I'm trying to see actually in any of your whiteboards if we actually have it written down, because I wouldn't be surprised if we did.
And there are certain ones that have apartments or that could be unclear if you leave out a west. Like if you leave out a west, then USPS will return 2 possible addresses because there's a north or an east and a west of that particular street. So there are some addresses that we know are classically hard to match, and those are the ones that we have scattered throughout all of our testing.
All right, so moving on, before you talked about an address that was a little bit scary to move into, I would say all of these fit into that category. And we actually have some street views for a couple of these. So let's take a look at that first address. I know, right? Which one, David?
101, it's like they're trained serial killers there. 101 bucket of blood. That's crazy.
Oh, just wait till you see it. So this is the street view for 101 Bucket of Blood Street. It looks like you would have a Western
like an
shootout
old
there.
Western.
No, it's like you could seriously film a Western here. You wouldn't even need a green screen or any props. You just plant down 2 actors right in the middle of there, and it would fit perfectly. You don't even need like the orange filter in front of the camera because it just comes naturally to this part of the world, apparently.
You know what would be great is if Google didn't add the bucket of blood on the street. It's actually painted there.
Yeah.
In red ink.
And there's one little business down at the very far end, and it was unclear about what they did, and I didn't even want to ask. It was
Halloween masks. They should do Halloween masks.
Or they're butchers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
But you know that there's just funny addresses. You know, we get hard to match addresses, long addresses, short addresses. But you know, living at 101 Bucket of Blood, that, I don't know, in my opinion, that would be kind of cool, right? You wouldn't be in like a boring numbered street or anything. It's, oh yeah, I live on over on Bucket of Blood. You know, it'd probably be hard for my kids to get play dates, you know, living there, but still, it'd be pretty cool.
What's your address? We'll meet you at the park.
And what's kind of interesting about the 5th and the 6th one down, 4th and the 5th, I'll learn to count someday. Anyway, bewitching and beguiling, those are 2 parallel streets in a neighborhood in Las Vegas. I thought those were really cute. Somebody had a good sense of humor there.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, and you know, going with the theme though, some of these I was looking up on Street View and or trying to satellite view, whatnot. We couldn't quite get a good picture for a lot of these. But these guys right here in particular are like in the middle of the forest, and they're like down winding dirt roads. And I don't know, if I was driving through, you know, the middle of backcountry New York and I had to turn through a dark forest road onto Sicko Road, I don't think I would.
And Sicko Road is next to a lake that is very, very dark. It's a dark lake too. So yeah,
that's
Sicko
so
Road
scary.
But you know, there's lots of these types of addresses out here. I think we have another picture for 11 Hell of a Hill. And here we go.
And it actually looks really daunting, doesn't it? It's got strange shadows.
But I looked it up and I'm like, that is not that much of a hill. It's a bit of a misnomer.
Oh, really? Yeah. I was
no, it basically just looks like it's in the middle of a field, and I was a little disappointed.
But there's some scary trees around there, so it's.
Why is that 11 Hell of a Hill Lane instead of 11 Stony Bank Road?
Oh.
That is an excellent question. Moving on. No, honestly, couldn't figure it out. I think that there might be like a little bit of a side
like a private
here,
maybe.
But to be quite frank, maybe this is an alias. So like sometimes streets have multiple names. You mentioned it before, like that. Sometimes really long street names have nicknames. Streets can often have multiple names, and this might be the case where Hell of a Hill Lane might also be Stony Bank Road.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's just the guy's driveway. He probably paid extra to have that name, I'm guessing.
He just really hated going up that hill. It's a little tiny one. Or he really loves how that hill looks, and he's with an old Western voice says that's a hell of a hill.
But moving on with the theme, so we had the Halloween themed, and now we get a little bit of the more wonderful time of the year. We get Christmas. So there's actually a considerable amount of Christmas-themed addresses in the United States, which kind of surprised me. So we can see we have some stats down here. Addresses with Christmas in the name, we have almost 9,000. Addresses with Santa Claus in the name, almost 2,500, which is way more than I was expecting.
That's so fun.
I would pay extra to have my house on like Christmas Lane or something like that.
Really?
Live out my Hallmark dreams. Yes.
Yeah.
It's like decorated all year long. I'm like so cute and cozy.
And Santa, Idaho, actually is just a really small town. It's got like one store in it. It's very cute. It's in a forested area. That would be a fun place.
So how far north is Santa Claus, Idaho? Because I feel like, I don't know, if you're calling yourself like North Pole, Texas, it just sort of feels a little out of place, right? If you're up in Alaska, sure, that works. But if you're like in the south part of Idaho, I don't know if you're allowed to call yourself Santa Claus, right?
Geocode it real quick.
It's about 3/4 of the way up in Idaho, in the forested area. Yeah, really pretty place.
Fantastic.
Now, North Pole, Alaska, though, that's fascinating. It's not real high like Prudhoe Bay. It's kind of right in the middle of Alaska, but
I think we have a picture for that, don't we?
Yeah, I believe we do.
This is North Pole, Alaska. It's pretty zoomed in. So
and Ursa Major Drive here is really pretty. You got this lovely river around it. It's very forested. Whereas Santa Claus Lane, I think it's the previous picture back. Yeah, Santa Claus Lane is not quite so triumphant. It's just kind of this business area. I don't know. I would have made Santa Claus Lane something a little prettier than this, but
yeah, you can see some of the local businesses that are starting to get in with the theme, though, right? Because you got the North Pole Dental Workshop, the North Pole
Academy.
What was that?
Antler Academy on the right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're starting to get with the theme a little bit. And that makes it fun. I think it's really awesome that places like this can really dive into the theme of wherever they're named. Sometimes places are named after what's around them, right? Boise is famously, named from French that refers to the trees that they saw in the area. You get cities and state and place names that refer to the area around them. But sometimes you get a little bit of the opposite. We're starting to get a little bit of North Pole theming based around where it is. And I think that's really fun.
Yeah, that's kind of fun.
I do want to point out before you move on, look at Ursa Major Drive, the other one you're at.
Yeah.
This one looks a lot like Hell of a Hill, but the name of the address makes a difference as to it being, how did Bryan describe this one? Really cute and quaint, and the other one was murderous. So names matter.
It's all in the matter.
Oh yeah, so
I feel like
this one and then back to Hell of a Hill. Yeah, I can definitely see the resemblance, right? Maybe it's the people living there, right? It's like if you're living near a guy that names their house Hell of a Hill Lane versus the guy that names themselves, Ursa Major Drive in North Pole, Alaska, you're probably expecting to find some different people there, right?
And you'll also notice down in Ursa Major Drive, there's a little airport down there. That must be like for puddle jumpers or something, because I don't even see a runway. But
that just looks like a field.
Well, it's only made to service reindeer that are dragging sleighs.
Wow.
I think we found it. Yeah.
All right. So coming up, we have Operation Santa. Bryan, you want to explain a little bit about this? I think you know more about it than I do.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. The U.S. government set this up long ago. There is the Elf Road in North Pole with all 8s for a zip code. And usually zip codes start with 0 on the East Coast and end up with 9 on the West Coast. But this actually goes to Washington, D.C. And the valid primaries are 101 through 199. You can use any one of those primaries and it gets delivered to Washington, D.C. And it's actually, they go through every one of the letters that are received and they post them online, and people can actually go to that URL and register and fulfill little children's dreams and buy them presents. They get sent, basically, you get a QR code to keep privacy intact. They send you a QR code and you mail it with that QR code, and the post office, your local post office, will then put the right label on it so it gets to the proper house. But I thought it was really cute that the government established Elf Road in North Pole, but it actually just goes to a warehouse in D.C. It kind of removes, kind of destroys some of the magic, but I think it's a great thing to do. Somebody here in Smarty actually loves to go on, and she's in her own words, I spent way too much money on helping fulfill kids' dreams. But
if there's something to get addicted to,
yeah, there could be
not a
worse,
bad thing.
right?
Yeah, it could be worse.
Brian, are you telling me that Santa Claus lives in Washington, D.C.?
I can neither confirm nor deny it.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting some conflicting messages here, Brian, right? Because we got the North Pole, which is actually in Alaska, and then, Santa Claus, which is in DC. So
I don't know. I've been to DC. It looks like North Pole to me, right? No, never mind.
So to abruptly change the subject. So Smarty has U.S. address validation and standardization, and we also have international. There's a question here that says, I'm in Canada. My colleague uses Smarty. I'm new to Smarty. She says that Smarty sometimes doesn't handle all of the postal codes, and sometimes Smarty doesn't handle the rural routes properly in Canada. So how often does Smarty update their international address sets?
We update him about once a quarter, and I don't know that I'm revealing anything too.
You already did the Santa thing,
here,
Brian.
but
You can't go down.
Yeah, you already ruined Christmas for everyone.
But we do outsource that data, and so we are constantly working with that vendor to make sure that they're specifically Canadian addresses. And we do have a Canadian a kind of a project right now that we're working on to make Canadian addresses much, much better. So I appreciate you bringing that up when we are working on the problem.
Yeah, so I think the thing we can say is just like, we hear you, we understand, and we're working on that as best as we can right now.
One thing that I have heard our support team say that is really, really good is if you are finding a regular errors in your address data, please do chat in. If you go to smarty.com, in the bottom right corner, there's a little chat bubble that goes straight to our support team. They're right on the other side of this door. And if you can give them information, in many cases, they can manually add that to make sure that it is in the next iteration. So by all means, use our support to make sure that you're getting what you need.
All right, fantastic, wonderful question. And with that, we're actually going to bring up our address validation in particular for a U.S. street product, but it can apply to international as well. If you enjoyed hearing about us chat about addresses and all the work that we do to make sure that your addresses match, go ahead and check it out and participate a little bit in all of the address matching solutions that we've been able to write up for you guys. Andrew, anything else that you want to say about this?
I think I've discovered a new tagline. I think we should say, Smarty, we don't judge people, just the addresses they live at. maybe that'll. Oh man. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks in the order that I'm seeing them. David, Brian, Savannah, and Adam. Thanks for your time. I think a lot of the folks that are on here right now are probably already familiar with us. That's why they're here to chat. But if you're not and you would like to check addresses, you can do so for free at smarty.com. You can find under our products all kinds of free stuff. If you want to do address checks in mass, you will need a free account or a paid plan, depending on how large you're going to be processing, but that can all be done at smarty.com. So do check that out. Again, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Happy holidays, everybody.
See ya.